Let's talk about our domestic policy when it comes to defence acquisitions. What did you make of the speech this week from the Prime Minister at ADFA?
Look, a really significant speech, I thought, pretty well executed by the government and really acknowledging some trends that have been visible for some time but are now alarmingly clear. And again, another speech by the Defence Minister today reinforcing the points. Pretty dramatic statements from both of those leaders, essentially saying that the post-World War security order that we've become very accustomed to is gone, and in its place is a more uncertain world that Australia needs to be more prepared for and to demonstrate that we can actually defend ourselves and inflict damage on an adversary if need be.
The former Prime Minister John Howard, I spoke to him earlier, the full interview is coming up after 4 o'clock this afternoon, but basically on China, he praised the Prime Minister on that speech and the defence commitment, but he also said that Australia shouldn't give up trying to re-establish the equilibrium that he enjoyed as Prime Minister between China on the one hand and the US on the other.
Well, there's no certainties here, and it's not just all about China. I mean, the thing the government couldn't say in its announcements yesterday is that the major shift that's happened in the 4 years since the last Defence White Paper is in Washington rather than in Beijing. And the most significant announcement in the Defence Update yesterday, I think, was the fact that Australia is going its own way when it comes to satellite communications. That's a sign that we want to hedge a little bit against the United States and those capabilities we rely on. And that's a big shift in Australian defence policy. But there are no certainties in terms of where our region is going and the diplomacy that we're undertaking. To the extent that we can encourage China to take a more responsible path in concert with other allies and partners, we should absolutely be doing that. And to the extent that we can encourage the United States to strengthen its relationships with allies rather than weaken them, we should be doing that as well.
A group of ex-cabinet secretaries and White House officials in the Bush administration, George W. Bush that is, have set up a political action committee for the election of the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden. This is, we've said it many times, a very bizarre situation in the United States, but there are hundreds of Republicans who served in a presidential administration now putting their name to the election of the Democrat.
Look, we saw that in the last election to a much more moderate degree. Lifelong Republicans like Richard Armitage prepared to vote for and serve in a Hillary Clinton-led administration. We're seeing much more of them come out now, and I'd keep an eye on George Bush Jr. I think we might see him make some sort of intervention in the coming months from some of the signalling he's done, that video that he released about staying strong through the pandemic. But the message here is that they want to prioritise stability over chaos, and they want to prioritise country over party, and that appeals to some of the best traditions in Republican politics. Whether it will be influential in shifting voters out of Trump's base, that's another question. There is a contest happening for the right to define what the Republican Party looks like into the future.
There is a series of polling that suggests that Joe Biden is ahead. Obviously, we know the history of 2016, so that comes with that caveat. But this is national polling, also the key swing states. He's got substantial leads in all the polls I've seen in recent days.
Yeah, well, we were talking last week about that poll in the New York Times. It showed a significant bump and a change in some key demographics of voters for Joe Biden that hadn't supported him last time round, particularly his much higher favourability over Clinton's in those key groups. We're seeing some more consistent results there. And then on the president's side, I think we're seeing some more dysfunction. Yesterday, reporting that the president has turned on his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's inserted himself in a lot of the issues that the president has tried to lead on, most recently and notably the Palestinian-Israeli peace plan. Apparently the president now starting to say, I need to stop listening to his advice, I need to trust my own instincts. So we're seeing some fracturing inside the president's own family, let alone in his administration.
Yeah, and it's such a volatile period as well. I mean, divisions there, but divisions across the board, in terms of the race relations, the economic downturn from COVID, it is really a tough time because even the president's economic credentials, which had been his major strength, have been diminished.
Look, we've forgotten about some of the extraordinarily complex and chaotic situations that US politics has found itself in the last few hundred years. So, the US gets itself into these extraordinary situations because it's an extraordinary country. But there is so much time between now and November and so many more things that could happen. It's just going to be a fascinating race to watch. At this stage, you would say none of the president's traditional strengths are working for him, neither the rallies nor the economy, nor even his instincts on foreign policy. Every day there's new details coming out about the way this administration works or how it doesn't work. We saw the Carl Bernstein reporting this week about the contents of some of the president's phone calls with international leaders, reinforcing that message that he is terrible to his friends and he is so easily convinced by his enemies and adversaries of the United States. And we're seeing so many issues that are nibbling away at the relationship between the president and his congressional supporters. It's a lot to manage at a very difficult time, and whether he can keep it all together and win the election, it's going to be an enormous challenge for him.